Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel and welcome back to Build Newcrest Community Lots Edition. So today I am building the Newcrest Library because that's what you guys voted on last week. It was actually a unanimous vote between the library and the Arts Center, so I went with the library. So yeah, this is the library. I went with a more classical, I guess you could say, style of build for the main part of the library. I wanted it to seem like the library had been there for a very long time, you know, typical like big white building with the columns and the big steps, kind of like if you've ever been to New York City, like the main branch of the New York City Public Library where it has like the big stone lions out front. That's kind of what I was going for. And then I decided that, you know, because a lot of times libraries are buildings that have been around in a community for a very long time. So, you know, as styles and trends change and as the needs of the community changes, a lot of times they end up doing like extra additions or add-on areas to the original structure. So, so the main part of the building is like old and very traditional looking, and then there's I guess addition on the back of the building, I guess is what you would call it, that's like very modern and contemporary looking. It's not very sleek, you know, it's not like what you would think. I don't know how to explain this. It's something that it's what people would think would be modern, but it's not actually very modern. I don't know. You'll see it. It's in the thumbnail at the beginning, but it's kind of awkward looking in a way. Because sometimes they don't really think about the existing structure and adding it on in the correct way. They just slap on something that sort of looks okay-ish, but not really. So that's what I was going for. So this build is basically intentionally kind of awkward looking. So the main part of the building is pretty straightforward, very simple, very traditional. And then the back part is just, it's kind of a mess. But I built it that way. It's intentionally supposed to be a mess. So I wanted it to kind of also blend in with the area around it, which most of the other buildings around it are newer, and they are more modern, whereas the library is pretending to be modern. And then I started off with a much bigger structure than I end up with. I don't know why. I didn't really think about how small this lot really is. So it's a little crowded. It's not a very big lot. And there was a lot that I wanted to put in the library that I either had to leave out or kind of downsize a little bit on. But in the end, I think it works out really, really well. But it did take me a little while because at first I was like, oh, this is going to be great. This big, like, you know, super traditional federal style building. And then I was like, oh, wait, no, I can't do that because I wanted to have that addition spot in the back. It also took me a while to figure out a way to make the addition to look like it was an intentional add-on that wasn't done very well. So that took me some time. I really didn't know how to do the roof on it, which, yeah, you'll see some of that here in a minute. It's not great, but in the end it works out really well. But for one thing, I'm not much of a modern builder. Most of my builds are like more traditional and more classic in nature, and this is not. This is basically the opposite of it. So yeah, this is me struggling with the roof. It's not pretty. I do apologize, but eventually it does get there. Basically I had to have a clean slate. That's all there was to it. Once I got rid of what I had originally put on for the roof and was like, oh, I need to do the diagonal part first, because I also wanted it to be something that was visible from the screenshot or the thumbnail when it goes up on the gallery, because otherwise you kind of miss the point of the building. Like, it's supposed to look like there's been this awkward addition stuck on the back. So if you can't see that from the beginning, then what's the point? Also, can I just say, these like foundation trims are terrible. I I wish we had foundation trims that had like stacked stone or something other than like brick. There's so much with brick, and the brick doesn't always work out very well. And so I don't know what this one was called, but the one that I went with, I selected the white, and it looks gray. Like, that is not white. The building is white. It should be the same color as the building, but it doesn't look that way. And I don't know. It was kind of frustrating to figure out, like, how I wanted it to look, you know? And yeah, so then I put in some windows on this, like, weird modern roof area up here at the top. Because in theory, I would like it so that you could see down into the second floor of the addition part of the building, but there isn't a way to do that. Like, I didn't really like that I could still see the other roof from inside of the diagonal roof. I don't know. I had some frustrations with this build. Like, going into it, I had a really clear picture in my mind of what I wanted, and it took me a really long time to get there. I think in the end it turns out really nice, but it's a struggle. It is, I'm not gonna lie, it was a struggle for me to get there. I wound up having to split building this. Usually I do my builds all in one sitting, because then it's a little bit easier for me to like stay on track with what I want and what I've been doing and where I had stopped. I had to split this up, I think, like 3 separate times because I just got so frustrated with it. So, and then briefly I thought about putting like an air conditioning unit up top on the old part of the building, like on the roof, because there wouldn't have been space for it on the newer part. And then I was like, well, the older part of the building probably didn't originally have central air, because I was going for something that was probably built 200 years ago, maybe a little bit longer. Obviously, the style of the windows are not what would have been there originally, but, you know, it's easy enough to swap out windows, and, you know, maybe they had been broken at some point and they needed to remodel them, or maybe they just wanted to put on a fresh look on the facade of the building. You know, because a lot of times, especially it seems like, okay, I live in the United States, and a lot of times our like so-called old buildings, which aren't even that old compared to like Europe's old buildings, our old buildings don't seem to last. Like, we get so anxious in the United States to get rid of older buildings and replace them with new looking ones. Like, I don't know why, because, and I know that this happens in other countries too, but it seems like when our buildings aren't even honestly all that old, like sometimes there are buildings where they're only like 40, 50 years old, and they're like, nope, tear it down. Like, and then sometimes people will take like what was old and try to remodel it, and they don't always do a very good job. So I went to Harvard on a trip. I've been to Harvard a couple times just to visit, but I went to Harvard on a trip with my family 10 years ago. Oh God, I just did the math in my head. That was 10 years ago. All right, well, I feel very old. But in any case, one of the things that I remember from our tour was that they said that in their promotional material, they actually go in and edit out buildings that were built in the 60s and 70s from their promotional material because they are so ugly. But they do have a policy of not tearing down buildings, that's good. Like, you know, because what we find ugly now, which is a lot of times things that were built like in the 70s and even the 80s, you know, those are things that we as a society have decided are now gross and we don't like them. But in another 40, 50 years from now, that could become something that's like kitschy or trendy, and then we'll want to have those original so-called ugly buildings back. That's like, I was reading something about this recently where in the 1910s, there was this big movement to make everything like very clean and hygienic. So like anything that had ornate details on them, so basically any sort of like Victorian styled buildings, were suddenly like no longer in trend, because the idea was that like dirt and germs and contamination would build up inside of like all of the, details of the woodwork and all of that. And so a lot of, buildings that we view now as like these beautiful historical buildings, a lot of those buildings got torn down because they thought that they would harbor disease, which in all honesty, I mean, like, they're not totally wrong with that. Like, anytime you have something that's a more detailed design, it's going to be difficult to clean out. But that being said, that doesn't necessarily mean you should get rid of it. But yeah, so I just sort of thought that, like, that was kind of an interesting concept, that, like, buildings that had been 30 years old in the 1910s were suddenly considered, like, gross and outdated. Because, of course, now we don't think that way. Like, about buildings that were built in, like, the 1880s, 1890s. It's like, ooh, those are pretty old homes or whatever. But at that point, they were like, ew, gross, we don't like that, tear it down. And now we sort of have that same thing happening, where it's like things that were built in the 80s are like, oh, that's so like weird and gross and ugly. And, given a little bit more time and those things will always come back. Like they always say, like, fashion is cyclical. Like the things that were popular in the 90s when I was a kid are now suddenly like popular again, and it's kind of weird because it's not all of them, but it's like versions of them. So, everything just runs in a cycle. I don't know. So, in any case, long story short, that's kind of what I was going for here. So, this like main part of the building is very, like, I was kind of going for like a federal style. Like it's maybe from the 1700s, like the late 1700s or so. And then over time, things got changed a little bit. Like, I don't know that the 2 horse statues were originally part of the building, but, maybe 40 to 50 years later, they were a gift to the library from some generous benefactor who decided, hey, I have these horse statues and I'll just donate them. So it was kind of an interesting challenge to intentionally do something that was a little bit of a mishmash of styles and periods in time. I will say, I mean, in general, this main building sticks to that older federal style pretty well. Okay, this is another beef of mine. The end tables in The Sims 4 are too big, and I feel like I've said this before, but I'm glad that we have that scaled down sheet because it does make them look a little bit better. But like that little table that I put between the 2 leather wingback chairs, it's not really a functional table. Like, you can't put stuff on it because I had to shrink down the size for it to fit. So that's kind of a bummer, but it looks okay because as is, it would have been way too big. Like, why do we not have any tables that are a little bit smaller? Even if they have to stay the same height, because like I get it for like modeling purposes, it works better if it's all the same height at least. But surely they could make tables, or at least end tables, that are the same height but maybe a smaller profile, where it's not taking up the whole square of the grid on the ground. I don't know. That's just my thought. So this super colorful yellow and blue area is the kids area. And it's like a little bit of a sensory overload. I kind of did that on purpose again though, because a lot of times it feels like libraries, like the kids' room is intentionally overdone. Like they do that so that way then it's extra enticing maybe. I'm not really sure actually why that is. So fun fact, I actually have a master's degree in library and information sciences. So, I, in theory could work at a library as a librarian. And I specialized in children's librarianship. So like a lot of my classes were about like selecting materials for children and, doing my, I had to do like a practicum, which is basically like a fancy word for an unpaid internship. So I had to do one of those in order to graduate, and I chose to do it in a children's library that was, in my area. And yeah, it's just like across the board, all children's libraries are just like so extra colorful and just, I don't know, I guess it does make it more enticing for kids, and it, like all the bright colors helps them, I don't know, like think more creatively and learn better and, Yeah, so this is like a little toddler reading area with the floor pillows that came from the toddler day. Is it toddler day? I just call it this toddler stuff pack. So clearly this is now where there was a break because I was starting to get a little irritated and frustrated with this. So now we're back in the toddler area with a giant frog rug, which it's just, I don't ever use that except for things like this. You know, like even in kids' rooms in my houses, I prefer to have them be a little bit more subdued, you know, because eventually in gameplay, your kid is going to grow up. And they're not going to want a giant frog rug on their floor. I mean, like, maybe they will. But definitely, by the time a kid's a teenager, they probably won't want that. Unless they are, like, really into, like, frogs or something like that, you know? So I tried to make kids' rooms, like, a little bit less colorful. I mean, they are colorful, obviously. But it's not quite so over the top like this is. So yeah, just going through, I also added in the toddler's style dollhouse from the same stuff pack again. Just because it seems like a lot of times children's rooms at libraries also have like a play area as well. Like, you know, maybe not very much, but there's always usually like a few like doll houses or, you know, a thing for you to like play cars on or something like that. Just because, you know, I mean, like, it is all about the learning. So your kids, you know, they might not be wanting to read a book, but they could at least find something else that would keep them entertained for a little bit. And maybe their parents are in the main part of the library, like, you know, doing research or just studying or, you know, just picking out books for their own leisure. So yeah, I also put in, and I don't know when this came in, but I also do put in a couple of the drawing tables from, I think those came from the Parenthood game pack. I don't remember. But yeah, so I also thought that, you know, that could be like kids' rooms at the libraries aren't just about like books, you know, it's about all types of learning. And so I thought that would be kind of cute to stick in a couple, you know, little drawing areas. So yeah, so I think kids would really enjoy this room a lot. I also decided to stick the bathrooms for the whole library in that part of the library. I don't put that part in my video because they're bathrooms. They're kind of boring. But I did intentionally do that because my thought is, and I didn't put toddler toilets in. I should have, but I forgot about it. But my thought is that adults can always go into a kid's room to go to the bathroom, you know, like that's not going to be a big deal for them because, you know, adults can hold it if they really have to pee. But kids are more likely to have accidents, at least in real life. I don't know about in The Sims, but, you know, especially like when they're first potty training, like if they've got to go, they've got to go, and it's got to be now, you know, like unless you want to have a wet puddle on the floor, it has to be like an immediate thing. So I figured it would probably be a smart idea to just stick the bathrooms by where the kids would probably be. So upstairs, I wanted to create an area that was like a lot of stacks of books, you know, like we've all been in like very traditional looking libraries or like college libraries where it's just like rows and rows and rows of books. So I was trying to figure out a little bit ago there what type of bookcase would work best for that idea. And I went with this one. I believe it was from Get to Work, maybe? I don't actually remember now that I'm thinking about it. But so upstairs here, there's not as many like seating areas, but there's a lot of books. There are some seating areas in the corners of this room, and then there's a lot of seating in the next room over. But this room is really more for gathering resources, and then they can always take it to another room. I did put in a little miniature study area right here just because there wasn't really a good spot. Like, I didn't really want to put a big stack of books like right there where I put the two desks because I just didn't think that they would look very good there because that's like the main window over the front door of the library, and I don't really want to block the light from all of that. So Yeah. So then I put in some seating areas here in the corners. Not much, but just something where, like, you know, if you have a couple of Sims and one of them's looking for a book and the other one's already found their book, they can just sit down and, you know, wait for their friend to finish searching. Sorry, I had to take a drink of water. So I have really bad seasonal allergies. So in the last, like, 2 or 3 days, allergies around here have become, like, really bad. Like, the pollen count is super high suddenly, and so it's complicated. So I have allergies, but they're not technically allergies. They're a non-allergic reaction, which present themselves as exactly like allergies. So I have the itchy red eyes, and, you know, I have all the typical allergy symptoms, like sneezing and all that stuff. But traditional allergy medicine does not treat it because the reaction type is a non-allergic reaction. I don't know. It's complicated. But point being, I can't really take allergy medicine. So this time of year, I just have to kind of hunker down inside and not expose myself to any irritants, which is easier said than done. Like, you can't live in a bubble. So I did take a Benadryl like 2 hours ago or so, just because that is one of the things that can help me, but it also makes me super drowsy. Like, I can take it's like the tiniest, like, single dosage of Benadryl possible. Like, frame of reference here, my 20-pound dog takes the exact same amount of Benadryl for her allergies that I do. And for her, we've tried giving her Benadryl, like, before people come over to, like, help her stay calm. And it has, like, no effect on her. It doesn't make her drowsy. It does help with her allergies, but it doesn't make her drowsy at all. Me, I take a Benadryl, and I am out like a light usually within an hour. Like, it's bad how sensitive I am to any medicine that has, like, the possible side effect of drowsiness. I will fall asleep. It's a guaranteed thing. So I took a Benadryl, and then I was like, okay, it's like 1 PM. I'm recording this at like 3:30. I need to be, like, somewhat alert for the rest of the day, but I also needed to not be in so much agony. So I took a Benadryl, and then I made myself a giant mug of coffee. Like, for Christmas, one of my friends gave me this huge mug. I think she got it at Target, but it's really cute. It's like this pink mug, and it's so big. And best of all, I can, like, make, what is it, like 16 ounces of coffee I think I made? I don't know. It was a big cup of coffee. Normally, I try to limit myself to just 1 cup of coffee in the morning, but I was like, I gotta do something, and hopefully this will help me from falling asleep while sitting at my desk. And so far, it seems to be working okay, but I'm not sleepy, but I am, like, mentally a little bit more slow than normal. Like, it is taking me a little bit longer to, like, figure out what I want to say, and the words just don't come to me right now. So this is, like, the more modern part of the building again. This is the upstairs, like, study room area, so it is very modern. I wanted it to be a big contrast from the rest of the building. And I also, like, not just the more traditional part that's, like, kind of stuffy feeling. I also really wanted it to be very different from the children's area that's downstairs below it. I did intentionally make the staircase area so you could see kind of down into the children's part, because my thought was that way then if you had, like, kids downstairs and maybe teenagers and young adults and adults and whatever, everybody else in their family is upstairs, like, studying or whatever, they're not that far away from the kid, and you can still kind of, like, see down, make sure everybody's okay. So then I decided to make a fence out of the books. So I just scaled up each one of those little book clutter items and turned them into a fence. I've had that idea in my mind for the library since I started this series, like, several weeks ago. Like, I'm like, okay, when's it gonna be the library? I gotta do the library because I want to make my book fence. So I was very excited because, I don't know, I like my little book fence. It's cute. And then I'm just putting around some trees and stuff outside. I did put in, like, one little bench around back just because I thought that would be, like, a nice little area to just, I don't know, sit down outside. A lot of these builds so far, well, obviously the pool and the park were both outside, but even the art museum, I wanted to make like an indoor and outdoor type of building, and this is really just mostly an indoor building. Like, there's no outdoor seating area really, or, you know, even like a patio, but I figured, you know, that's okay. There's a lot of other options around. Like, if your sim wants to spend some time outside, there are plenty of other choices, but I did thought, you know, I will throw in one bench, you know. Maybe if you're working at the library, that's where you can, you know, sit down to eat your lunch just to get a break or something. I don't know. Use your imagination. That was sort of my thought, though. Especially, like, I don't know, every time I've worked somewhere where the break room is, like, more in the public eye, I don't know, I feel like then you never get a break. Or, like, working retail, trying to, like, walk to the break room, but, like, you still have to pass through most of the store. People are going to stop you and ask you for questions and advice, like, where can I find blah, blah, blah? And you're like, I'm on break, leave me alone. Anyways, so now we're into the screenshots. So yeah, the Newcrest Library is up on the Sims 4 gallery right now. You can find it underneath my username, Mrs. Tomato 1018, or the hashtag Mrs. Tomato 1018. As always, there's no custom content, although I do recommend turning on the move objects cheat before you place it, just because there's a lot of stuff that I've moved around. So there's no vote this week because the last building in this neighborhood is the Arts Center, so that's what I'm going to do next. And then we'll move on to the next neighborhood the following week. So yeah, good stuff. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. If you've liked it, please give it a thumbs up down below. And if you haven't already subscribed to my channel, you can do so down below as well. I put out a new video every single day, Monday through Friday. So yeah, I don't know what else to say. I hope you guys have enjoyed this. I think I've said that already. Like I said, Benadryl, man, it is making me super groggy. Anyways, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye!